You are listening to the Healthy Christian Women Podcast, brought to you by Fit+Faith, the podcast for Christian women to grow healthier in their mind, body, and spirit. Jumpstart your health with your complimentary mind, body, and spirit detox checklist at healthychristianwomen.com/detox. That's healthychristianwomen.com/detox. Here's your host, Dr. Melody Stevens.
Hello and welcome to the Healthy Christian Women Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Melody Stevens, and this is Season 3, Episode 2. In this season, it's different from the previous seasons where we're going to be focusing a lot on interviews and bringing in different people with their expertise and their life story and their journey and all the different ways that they have come through different things in their life that God is now using to help them minister to other people. And Kelli is exactly that person. I'm so excited to bring her on. I'm happy to introduce to you Kelli Bartholomew, the Chief Encourager at Unstucklife. And she is going to be sharing with us some painful things, honestly, that had happened in her life, but what God did through that as an encouragement to you, as our listeners, that the difficult things that happen in our life, they are still just a part of our story. They're not the ending of our story. And God has, in a very powerful way, led Kelli through a way to help her process these things so that she can continue on in the best life that God has for her, using those things to help other people, which is what we should all be doing. So thank you so much for being here, Kelli. We're so excited to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here and to just share a little bit about my story and journey and the process that God has led me through. And because the place that I'm standing right now today, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And so I'm thankful to be able to share any insight with your listeners so that they can find themselves feeling the same way about whatever has come their way in their life. So
yes, exactly. And one of the main reasons that I feel that God told me we've got to have her on the podcast was because what happens a lot of times, and I've seen this with many women, is that things happen in life, unexpected things, difficult things, tragic things, or maybe things that have happened long ago, but they're still deep inside, never being fully healed, never being fully restored, never being fully brought to the surface for God to do the healing. And so they stay as something deep inside that is leading us into a place of remaining stuck, especially in our health. It remains a source of negativity in our mind, and it remains a source of guilt or shame in our life, or just of pain, of depression, of anxiety, of worry, of all these other things, and literally stops us from having breakthrough in our health too, because our health is more than just our physical body, but so much that happens in our mind and in our heart affects our physical body. Either we treat our body not well because we don't feel well up here, or our body itself holds on to so much pain and holds on to so much tension and holds on to weight because it can't release it because it's trying to protect us from pain. And so it's so interconnected. So immediately I was like, I know that there are women that are in this place, even though their circumstance may be different. And I want you to be able to impart your story and share with us what God has done through you and what He's spoken to you to help you get out of that place. And I know it's just going to be so powerful. So I will let you take it away from here. Share with us how Unstucklife came to be.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I just have to touch on what you're saying is so true. And, God's word says it's the truth that sets us free. So really the danger is to, when bad things come our way, to believe a lie. It's an opportunity for us to come into agreement with a lie about who God is, a lie about what His plans are for us, a lie about whether we can fully trust Him and depend on Him. And that's, I think, where a lot of people consciously or maybe even subconsciously get stuck. They come into agreement with a lie. They stop trusting God, they stop applying faith, and they stop living in the fullness of what God paid for on the cross, which is the biggest tragedy that there is, when the enemy can convince us that what Jesus did for us is not enough, and when he can get us to believe that He's not a good father, He doesn't have good things for us. And so a little bit about my story and how that came about in my life. I didn't grow up Christian. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I actually grew up in a very toxic, dysfunctional home. My father was and is an addict, so I grew up with alcoholism and just a lot of emotional stuff in my household growing up. My parents had a very unhealthy relationship. And for me, thank God I came to the Lord at 30, now 11 years ago, 30 years old. I just came to the end of myself and my own journey just after failed relationships and brokenness. I just, alone on my bedroom floor one December evening, just cried out to God and said, you need to be the man specifically in my life. You need to be the Lord of my life. I can't do it without you. And so I began my walk with the Lord and growing in him. And he did such amazing things, instantly, and started to reveal and heal so many of the wounds that I was carrying around about my identity and just traumas that had happened to me when I was younger in life. And so I began to grow in the Lord, and my family saw a difference. They were like, what is going on with this girl? I think at first they thought it was a fad, but after, a few more years went by, they're like, okay, this Jesus thing isn't going anywhere. So one of the greatest honors I had of my life is leading my mom to Christ. So I got the honor and privilege to lead my mom to the Lord and to watch her change right in front of my eyes. My mom and I, up until then, had a very kind of combative, like butting heads relationship, and she came to the Lord. And so her and I prayed. We became prayer partners, believing for the salvation for the rest of our family, believing mostly for the healing of my dad and his addiction. And he has just a laundry list of medical issues. I've seen him in immense physical pain for years and years and years. And I can't tell you how many nights I cried out at fasting and praying and asking the saints to pray for my dad. And my mom and I were both believing for his healing, that he was going to come to know Jesus as Lord and Savior, and God was going to touch him and heal him, and it was going to be amazing. So we were both pressing in for that. And actually, in January of 2017, my dad was hospitalized. He had actually he had overdosed on pills. He was in so much pain and so much turmoil. And he ended up in the hospital. And he'd been in and out of the hospital a lot, but there was something about that time that I just came to the end of myself with the Lord. I'm like, God, I have been praying. I have been believing, like, what is it going to take for you to reach my dad, And I released my dad to the Lord. For the first time, I said, God, you need to carry this. I can't carry it anymore. I can't be the reason that my dad, I can't do anything. So I fully released my dad's salvation, his healing to the Lord. And things got worse instead of better, right? So I come to this place of surrender, and my dad's in the hospital. He's out of the hospital. He's acting very erratic. They took him off all of these pain meds. And so he started acting really strangely towards my mom, and ended up back in the hospital, and decided he was going to leave my mom. He drained their bank account of all their money, and it was a really intense month back and forth of, is he coming in? Is he going out? They ended up ultimately releasing him from the hospital. And I remember talking to my mom about, well, what's the plan? And I called every day to check on them and see how they were doing. And he said he was leaving. So we thought he would just come home, pack his stuff, and leave. But I talked to her so he got released on a Saturday. Tuesday of the following week, I said, Mom, he's still at the house. What's going on? She said, well, we're taking it day by day. And I said, okay, how can I support you? How can we get you the support that you need to deal with all this crazy mess? And she said, well, I'm going to try to check out a Christian women's group, or maybe go see a counselor. And I got a call the next morning, February 1st of 2017, from my dad, letting me know that he had found my mom passed away early that morning, with a bottle of pills next to her body. And I can't begin to tell you the shock that went through my system. I just remembered yelling back at him, no, Dad, this can't be true, And I remember it was in Minnesota in February. So I tried to put boots on. I tried to put clothes on, and my brain just literally wouldn't work. It took me 45 minutes to drive to their house, which was 15 minutes away, because I kept turning down the wrong streets. The police were there. It was a whole scene. I mean, nobody, you can't really describe the shock that comes to your system. And one of the things that's surprising to me is like physically, it's so how much our emotions and our physical bodies are connected. When something like that happens, you feel a very physical response. It's very disorienting. And that's one of the things about trauma and tragedy is it sweeps the rug out from under you. It's very easy to you get caught up in this current. And if you're not careful, that current is going to take you where it's going to take you. And so it very much took me there. There's a lot of even more questions surrounding my mother's death. There's a lot of inconsistencies, and my dad hasn't been fully honest around a lot of that stuff. So I had questions. And for the first time in my life, and thankfully the only time in my life, I felt bamboozled by God. I was sure that God was moving and going to get my dad. We were so sure. I would have bet my right arm that God was at work. He was going to touch and heal my dad. He was going to come to the Lord. And then I lost my best friend, my mom, the only other saved person in my family, my only other ally in all of this. I was so angry with God. I was in a ministry role at the time. I wanted to quit my job. I didn't want anything to do with it. It took me a little bit to even be able to go to church. And can I tell you, the first time I went to church, I wanted to punch everyone in the face. Like I couldn't understand them singing these songs about a faithful God who never lets them down, But here's the beauty and the gift in that. Before my mom passed away, if you would have asked me, I would have said that my faith was unshakable. I would have said that I trusted God with everything. I would have said that I trusted him with my life. I would have said it was implicit, and it wasn't. But see, the thing is, we don't know until the rubber meets the road. We don't know until we're in the test, till we're in the trial, till we're in the fire, truly what we have. And I'm so thankful, actually, for the opportunity for that to be revealed, because in the midst of grappling through that and bringing that to the Lord, a very real foundational faith was formed. A very real, unshakable trust in the Lord was established in that place. Because I got to tell you, I was angry at God. I remember bargaining with him. I wasn't going to go to church. And then I said, you know what, Lord, I'm not going to tithe for a year. I deserve a year, at least a year, pain and suffering. I'm just going to withhold the tithe because you don't deserve it. And this was a real turning point for me. I went to church and the Holy Spirit convicted me to tithe. And I told God, I said, fine, I'm going to do it. I'm going to tithe. I'm not happy about it, but I'm going to do it. And I wrote out the check to tithe and I brought it down and I knelt down on the ground, and Holy Spirit said to me, you have never been more beautiful than this moment. And I just wept. And in the darkest, darkest place of my life, he didn't answer all the questions for me right there. He didn't make it all go away, but he was exactly the same as I'd always known him to be. And my deepest, darkest thing, as soon as I turned my heart even a little bit back towards him, there he was, just as gracious and welcoming as he had ever been. And that was the beginning of my healing. It was the beginning of trusting him again and committing to walk through the rest of this journey with him. So there was a lot longer to go. I wrestled with, I wanted answers. I wanted justice. And those are right things to ask our God, right? Because he is a God of justice and he knows all things. But I had to come to the conclusion to say, where is this getting me? Is the answer really what I want? Is justice? And more importantly, is God asking me to fight this battle? I was going to go to the media with this story. I was angry at the hospital for letting my dad go. I was angry at the police for not fully investigating. There's still so many questions. But at the end of the day, the Lord had to show me, I've not called you to fight this fight. I have not graced you to take on this giant, And I think that's so important for us to know. Like, God gives us the grace for our race, and we need to stay in tune and in step with him, because we do not have the grace for other people's races or other mountains. And that's such a trap of the enemy to get us off path and wanting to go in different directions. So I had to just lay down. I had to lay down my need for answers. I had to lay down my need for justice and vindication for my mom's name. I had to lay all that down But what he gave me was peace, right? What he gave me, because he gives us peace that surpasses understanding, but sometimes we have to lay down our need for understanding in order to receive his peace. So that was such a huge fundamental turning point for me. Another really big turning point for me was, when something horrific like that happens, people can't relate, and it can be very isolating. And that actually compounds the hurt. You have this really awful thing happen, and the people that you love and are used to going to don't know what to do. They don't know how to relate to you. They don't know how to comfort you. They either say nothing because they don't want to say the wrong thing, or sometimes they do say the wrong thing, and it can be very isolating. And that's how I found myself. My joke at the time was like, my life's like an episode of Dateline, like this doesn't happen to real people. So I felt very isolated. And I remember I went to a Christian leadership conference, actually, and I was like, I don't even know how I'm going to sit through this. I don't have the attention span to sit and listen to these people. But I heard a woman speak that had survived the Rwandan genocide. And her testimony is amazing. She shared about how her family hid her in a nearby village. And for 90 days, she shared a bathroom with 8 women and listened on the radio while 1 million people were massacred all around her. And she shared at this talk about how God led her through a healing process and a process of forgiveness. And I saw her speaking on stage. She is the first person that I'd seen that had gone through something even more horrific than the thing I was facing. And God was faithful to her. And God led her through, and there she was. She lives in New York now. She has 2 kids. She's happy. She's whole. And she became my role model. She became a beacon of hope for me, that if she can do it, and oh my goodness, what she endured, then I can do it too. And God's no respecter of persons. And so it gave me the hope and a role model to start moving forward in that direction. So I started, healing and recovering and finding my peace and joy. But as I mentioned, my, addiction is a huge issue in our family, and it was a cause a lot of this turmoil between my parents and my mom's ultimate passing. I actually have a son, a 21-year-old son who struggled with addiction as well. And that was, he struggled with addiction from like age 12, 13, a very young age, and went through all the ups and downs that addiction brings. If you're a parent of a child in addiction, you know all too well what it's like to have to kick your child out, what it's like to not know where they are, if they're alive or dead, and to get calls in the middle of the night. So that had been happening in my life kind of parallel with all this drama with my parents. And so I remember telling my son after I lost my mom, saying, I can't lose you too. Like, you need to be well, you need to be safe, you need to, because I can't fathom losing you too. My mom's death shook our entire family. It shook all of us to our core. My son he was pretty stable when it happened, but this put him on a tailspin, and he went on a bender, and he dropped out of college, and he used every drug known to man and was homeless for a season. It was really just awful, awful time in our family. Shortly thereafter, we all grew up in Minnesota. That's where I'd lived all my life. But shortly thereafter, an opportunity for a new job down in Florida, God just completely, fell into my lap and prayed about it and felt that it was a good move. So I moved down to Florida with my daughter Piper and started this new job in this new season. We were just excited for a new season and some sunshine and just all the things, a new chapter. My son stayed in Minnesota originally. And when I prayed about it, God just said, you know what, Kelli, you need a new season, and he needs to decide. He needs to stand on his own feet and decide what he wants his life to look like. So a couple months after moving down to Florida, my son called me and said, Mom, I just want to be with you in Florida. I just want to be with you and Piper, my daughter. And so I said, well, you need to be sober in order to come down here, which he was ready, willing, and able maybe to do, but he was committed to a healthy, sober life and was going to come down to Florida with us. So we were all in preparation for that, very excited for him to join us. And his family back in Minnesota gave him a going away party. And some of his friends took him out that night. And my son actually died of a drug overdose that night. Which in hindsight, I found when someone makes a commitment to get sober, it's a very risky time. I didn't know this at the time, but when someone's been using drugs and they make the decision and commitment to get sober, think about it. If you start a diet on Monday, you're going to have extra chocolate cake over the weekend. It's kind of that thinking times 100. Addicts very often will overindulge when they're about to make a commitment to sobriety. I just remember getting a call from his friends. We actually found out originally through social media, if you can believe that. Somebody had heard about it, and one of his friends posted a picture of him and said, "Rest in peace, gone too soon." So his friends saw that post and called me and said, have you heard from Quentin? Have you heard from him today? And I had just talked to him the day before. We were talking about plans for him coming to Florida. And I said, no, I hadn't, and he's like, well, he didn't come home last night. We don't know where he is. And we saw this post and we don't know why they would post that. So I spent a couple of hours, my family and I back in Minnesota, calling every police department, every hospital, everything and nobody could find him. Nobody had record of him. So we hoped that it was just an awful prank. But about 2.5 hours after originally hearing about it, the police confirmed with his father that he had passed away from a drug overdose early that Sunday morning. And again, the shock of it all, it's unreal to describe. My daughter was with me when I found out, and I'll never forget. I just was crying in my closet, and I said, God, this is too much. This is too much. This is too much, God. And my 13-year-old daughter said, Mom, God will never give you more than you can handle. And I said, well, I wish he would stop thinking so highly of me, because this is crazy. I will say that because of having just lost my mom, it was about a year after losing my mom and all the stuff that I already told you about. I knew what I needed to do in the days, when the initial shock and adrenaline wears off and you begin to start to dig into process. I knew that it was a trap to say why. I knew that it was a trap to demand answers. I knew that it was not fruitful to try to run from God or keep him. I knew that God had to be at the center of this if I was going to make it through, if I was going to live. And I very quickly established the framework that I was going to use to process this. And that is the first key. God has actually shown me 5 keys on how to advance through adversity, how to not just survive it, not just overcome it, but how to actually turn it and find the hidden treasures within it and to let it do its work in you so that you can be better off, that you can live a richer and fuller life. And the first one, it's so paramount, it's saved me so much heartache, is establishing the framework. Because the truth is, we all have belief systems and perceptions that we approach things. Everybody does. Some people are aware of it, some people don't. And so all of us as Christians, as Christ followers, the word of God and the truth about God, who God is, the actual truth and the truth of his word should be our framework. And that's something I don't want to gloss over, because I think it's so easy to be just cavalier or cliche about it, but it actually is. You have to be intentional, right? So if a circumstance or tragedies hit your life and it seems to contradict everything that you know to be true about God, you have to sit down and choose the framework that you're going to process this through. So for me, for example, the framework that I choose to process losing my son Quentin is that he's not gone. He's just not here. He is seated in heavenly realms. He is whole, lacking no good thing, and full of joy. I will see him again, and I will have all of eternity to spend with him. So those little few sentences in the framework of the truth of God's word and the eternal truth of this, like, heartbreaking, gnarly circumstance, when I look at the eternal truth of what it actually means, that is the framework that I'm using to process his passing. And that framework every day or multiple times a day or however many times I need it is the thing. It's the thing that grounds me. It's the thing that gives me something to hang on to. It's the thing that reorients me when I feel like my emotions want to take me out to sea, or grief wants to take me and have its way with me. When I feel, the rug swept under me kind of stuff, that is the thing that I come back to. And so that's the first thing that I really encourage people, because part of what's so devastating for trauma and tragedy is the disorienting. Like, most times you didn't plan on it. It was not in your plans for the year or goals or whatever it is. These things tend to just show up in our lives, right? And what can take people a really long time is reorienting themselves, finding their ground, feeling like they're not just having to be reactive, right? If we can be proactive, if we can switch that intentionality and that intentional thought, and yes, this has happened to you, and yes, you didn't ask for it, but you absolutely get to decide how you're going to respond to it and how you're going to process it. You can let it be the thing that's going to ruin the rest of your life, or you can let it be the thing that's going to actually make the rest of your life bigger and better than you could have ever imagined if it hadn't come your way. And please hear me. Just because God can make something amazing out of it, God did not cause this. God was not the author of destruction. The enemy comes to seek, steal, and destroy. Thank you. But God can take those things and take what the enemy even meant for harm. And if you'll allow him, if you will submit and surrender and let him have his way in and through you, through the circumstance, I'm here to tell you that he can turn it into something that you cannot even imagine right now. Right now, I'm beginning to step into and walk in and see the redemption and restoration of God's plans using these, back-to-back traumas and tragedies for the greater good. The fact that you and I are talking today is a testament to that. God has actually, this for me is my calling. It's my purpose. It's the message that I've been commissioned to send to anyone who will listen, to help people not let the enemy's, any weapon that was formed against you, to not let it prosper, but to turn it and use it for God's good and for his glory, and to bless not only you, but so many more people. So I'm just, I'm undone and overwhelmed. It's not even been, it's been a little over 9 months. He passed away July 8th of 2018. And so the fact that I can tell you honestly, I wake up every day excited and expectant and believing that for God's goodness to show up in my life, and it does every day. I'm not in denial. I still miss my son terribly. I still have moments and things that take my breath away or cause me to cry. And there's no shame in that. I lost my son. He's my heart, it's not to minimize it or say it isn't a real thing. It is very much a real thing. But how God is using this is breathtaking. It blows my mind. And I know for me, this is just the beginning actually of me sharing this story. So I can't even fathom where it'll be in a year or 3 years. It's so good.
Wow. Oh my gosh, Kelli, thank you so much for sharing. And oh my goodness, this is just so much to even just kind of take in, but through these things, the Lord has shown you kind of this process or these steps to help you move through it, so that it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't lead you to a path of destruction. It doesn't lead you to a path of turning your back on God, because those are definitely the very real things that we can question and that can happen and that turn people away from the church and from God altogether. Like, why did this bad thing happen?
Yeah.
I trusted you so much. I thought I had so much faith in you. Who are you now that you've allowed this thing to happen? And so thank you so much for kind of sharing that this is not the time to do that. This is actually the time for you to process through those things, but then see what thing God is going to do out of it. And that's what you've kind of allowed him to begin doing through you. So tell us, how can we who want more information about, you said there was 5 steps ultimately, or 5 parts of your Unstucklife
Yeah.
plan, right? Or is it the advancing through adversity plan that he's giving? You shared one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a Facebook group, a business page, Unstucklife. And so I did about a 20-minute video overview of the 5 different steps with just real high level touching on them. So you can go there and see that video. I also, one of the things I'm working to just establish and create right now is a community of people who are sharing the same framework and can hold each other accountable and encourage and support each other, that we're going to process this with an intentionality. We're going to process this through the framework of giving God glory and advancing his kingdom, because I really, in my experience, found that lacking, not just in the world at large, but even within Christian communities, which breaks my heart. You know, I've gone to a couple support groups, and I know there are great support groups out there, but the few that I've gone to, they weren't helping people to get well. They were just kind of, making it okay and commiserating with the pain of being stuck. And so I'm working to create a community where we can cheer each other on, and we're not going to minimize or deny the gnarly thing that's come in our life, but we are not going to lay down and let it have its way with us. We are going to recognize the source as the enemy, and we are going to rise up and make him pay for it and give God all the glory. And so I would love to have, any folks that are listening that resonate with that either need to work through some stuff themselves, or they just want to be a part of a community that is cheering on others, to not let the enemy continue with this deception or allow people to be apathetic or victim, any of that stuff. We're just not going to tolerate it, because Jesus paid for that on the cross, and there's work to be done, and we want to be about it. So
awesome. Wow, that's wonderful. So in this community, so that we can make it very clear who the community is meant to serve, is this specifically for people that have dealt with an unexpected loss, or is it broader than that, or is it narrower than that? Like, make it very specific, the types of women, and is it women only, or is it men too? So that the type of community that you're pulling together.
Yeah. I would say obviously it's women. That's more who I relate to and resonate with and feel called to serve. And certainly if they've been through, it's really about unexpected trauma or tragedy. And that can be the death of a loved one. That can be a divorce. That can be, bankruptcy, or something unexpected that knocks the wind out of your sails, and you're having to recalibrate and process through that in order to move forward. It can be something that you're currently walking through, or it could be something that happened several years ago, but even just listening to this message, you realize, like I might have, come into agreement with some lies, or I find myself still stuck or struggling. Any of those folks, I think, would benefit from getting connected to our community.
Wonderful. And we can find more information at Unstucklife on your Facebook page or on your website. What is the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, right now, the Facebook page, so at Unstucklife and Facebook is where we're just compiling, I'm 9-10 months out from losing my son. And so a lot of this is just really, it's revelation going straight into some building blocks and pieces. We're going to have an online course, kind of a web course, because I recognize too, grief, there's no schedule and timetable with grief. You kind of have the capacity to deal with things as you do. So I'm going to be putting a video series together so that folks can watch the videos when it works for them, to help go in greater detail about each of the 5 steps and give them some additional resources to really apply it to their life. And then, like I said, find the encouragement through the community of others as well.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for saying yes to God in what he's wanting to do through these multiple tragedies, and the healing that you've been able to begin to experience, and then using that to just blow this out of the water and help other people and other women, especially, not allow it to stall or create death in their life, spiritual death, in their life, and move forward from this thing. And so thank you so much for just being obedient to that call, and for being so open and transparent about these things, and for finding that there is a hole that is lacking for how do we in the Christian community deal with this and support this properly without just placating or just allowing someone to remain in that stuck place, not being able to move forward, and knowing that in the end, God is still good.
Yeah.
In the end, he will still lead you through, and he was with you throughout all the difficulty, and so thank you so much for that. I'm so excited to introduce you to my community and to our listeners here, and I know that it's going to meet a need for so many women. So thank you. So we will find more information at Unstucklife on Facebook and be a part of everything that you're building, everything as God continues to show you how to get this message out. And thank you for inviting us into that journey with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for all the encouragement and love and support you're pouring out to just equip up the women, right? And the bride of Christ to be the spotless, shining example that he designed for us to be before the foundation of the world was laid. And so thank you for all the pouring in that you do. And I just appreciate the opportunity to share.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Wonderful. Thank you. Ladies, make sure to go connect with Kelli and to go find her Unstucklife Facebook page and community and be a part of that, and continue to move forward in your own healing, realizing that today is the day for you to wake up and realize I am no longer going to stay stuck. I'm no longer going to be buried under the guilt or the depression or the sadness or the shame or anything else that is coming against you, that it is time for us to rise up and to break out and to step forward in the glory of the Lord. So come join her. Thank you both for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe and join me next week for the next episode of the Healthy Christian Women Podcast. Inspiring Christian women to live healthier in their mind, body, and spirit, one day at a time. Grab your complimentary mind, body, and spirit detox checklist at healthychristianwomen.com/detox. That's healthychristianwomen.com/detox.